I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. Now, the great escape. Daniel Khalif is still on the run, but the nets could be getting closed in on him. We'll be speaking to a former prisoner to find out, could he have done this alone or would he have needed inside help?
And we have got a TV exclusive for you on our show this morning. With all the focus on Ukraine, there hasn't been that much attention on what's been happening in Burma. Aung San Suu Kyi, the democracy campaigner, has been imprisoned by the military dictatorship there for a long time now. There were concerns about her health. We will be speaking exclusively to her son, Kim, will be telling her how she is and what the world needs to do about Burma.
And this is a world exclusive TV interview by the Sun. And also, can you believe it? We've had people working from home. Now they want to work from the beach. Really? Are they working? I don't think so. We're going to be exposing that and the councils who've agreed to the staff working from the beach.
Nice work if you can get it.
It certainly is, or not. No work.
No,
you can't do
well,
it.
exactly.
Sunbathing.
And we've got an all-star cast for our newspaper review this morning. We've got Mark Littlewood, the Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs, and former Labour advisor Matthew Lazar. So you won't want to miss what they've got to say. And of course, as always, we want to hear what you think about all these subjects and more, so get in touch, email us gbviews@gbnews.com. But before all of that, here's the news headlines with the wonderful Tamsin.
Phil, thanks very much, and good morning from the GB newsroom. It's 1 minute past 10. Police are focusing on the Chiswick area of West London for an escaped terror suspect after receiving confirmation of sightings overnight. Former soldier Daniel Khalif escaped from Wandsworth Prison on Wednesday by strapping himself to the bottom of a food delivery van. A close relative of Khalif is urging him to give himself up, and police are offering a £20,000 reward for any information that may lead to his arrest. From reports received, Khalif is believed to be wearing a black baseball cap, black T-shirt and dark-coloured bottoms and carrying a small bag or case. Former counter-terrorism officer Chris Phillips told GB News the police heavily rely on the public.
I think they're following up leads, and I think that's all they can do, really, is he would clearly have got away quite quickly from the roundabout, Wandsworth roundabout, when he got out from the bottom of the van. And then is which direction did he go? And then it's really just following up leads, following up contacts, people that he knew. He may well have contacts in Chiswick that the police have been looking at. And of course, the key one here is members of the public. Members of the public are the eyes and ears of the police in this kind of situation.
At least 632 people have died and more than 300 are injured after an earthquake hit Morocco. The quake, measuring 6.8 magnitude, struck the high Atlas Mountains yesterday. Its impact was felt in cities across the country. Residents of Marrakesh, the nearest big city to the epicentre, have been forced to camp after buildings crumbled. Many houses were damaged and a rescue operation is underway. One resident from Casablanca says he couldn't believe what was happening.
The house rocked aggressively. Everyone was scared and I was shocked and I didn't understand what was happening. I thought it was only my house that was moving because it's fragile and old. I heard people screaming. Everyone went out of their homes. The street is full of people and women screaming. That's what's happened. Even now, people can't go back home because they're still afraid because of the last hit. The first hit, we didn't feel it. People can't go back to their houses because they're still afraid. Because of the second hit, I think it's a 7 magnitude.
The Prime Minister says there's been enormous progress towards a free trade agreement with India. Rishi Sunak is meeting his Indian counterpart, Narendra Modi, for bilateral discussions, but he's refused to commit to having a trade agreement in place before the next general election. He also says he won't be pressuring India's Prime Minister to end his policy of neutrality to Russia. Meanwhile, just a few moments ago, G20 delegates reached a compromise on the language of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. 16 police officers have been injured after seizing explosives and weapons in Londonderry. Crowds attacked the officers as searches were carried out in the Cregan area. Handguns, money, grenades, ammunition and plastic explosives were discovered. 2 men and a woman have been arrested. Authorities say their main focus is on the new IRA. Today is expected to be the hottest day of the year so far, hitting 33 degrees Celsius in southern England. It follows the past 5 days of temperatures above 30 degrees in September for the first time. The forecasters say the record is likely to continue until the end of this week with an amber heat alert in place. In addition to the heat, the Met Office says central Britain could face potential thunderstorms later today in some parts of England. TV comedian and impersonator Mike Yarwood has died at the age of 82. He became a household name in the 60s and 70s with his impersonations of politicians and other public figures. The Royal Variety charity says he's left behind an immeasurable void in the entertainment industry, and tributes have been pouring in. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Esther and Phil.
Thanks there, Tamsin. So welcome to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil.
The manhunt for terror suspect Daniel Khalif, who escaped from Wandsworth Prison, heads into its 4th day. Yesterday, the police announced a £20,000 reward for information leading to his arrest.
However, the first sighting of Khalif has been confirmed. A member of the public said they saw him walking away from a van near the Wandsworth roundabout on Wednesday morning. The search is currently being focused in the Chiswick area of West London.
The Met's Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, said the escape was clearly pre-planned and the whole event has raised serious questions about how this escape was able to happen at all.
Well, let's speak now to former Wandsworth prisoner David Shipley. Hello, glad you could be with us there, David. So what we want to know, you've been in prison, is it possible to escape without inside help and information? Because a lot of people now saying, looks like an inside job.
I think it very much depends on the prison. In the case of Wandsworth, it's so badly run, such a sloppy organisation, so understaffed and so chaotic. I find it quite easy to believe that Khalifi saw an opportunity to get under the lorry in the kitchen. There are some big questions that Wandsworth has to answer, though. Working in the kitchens is one of the jobs in prison which gives you the closest access to the outside world. So there's no way anyone who's a flight risk should be allowed to work there. So why was Khalifi working there? The other huge question is why the lorry wasn't checked on the way out of the prison. The policy in Wandsworth, when I was there, and it still should be, is that every vehicle leaving is checked beneath with mirrors. And that's since there was a very similar escape to this at Wandsworth in 2019, where a prisoner stowed away under a lorry. So I think it's quite possible he could have got himself onto the lorry, under the lorry, without assistance. The big question there to answer, though, is why was that lorry not searched?
So I guess what you're saying then, David, is that it's either with the collusion of the staff or the negligence of the staff. It has to be one or the other, I guess. The question the point that you made there that I wanted to pick you up on, you mentioned about him working in the kitchen. People have raised a few eyebrows that a remand prisoner would be working in the kitchen and sort of said that actually it's usually a job that's given to somebody who's been in prison for a long time and shown a sort of high level of good behaviour. What's your experience of that? Was it a surprise to you that a remand prisoner would be working in the kitchen?
It wasn't a surprise, no. I think that would generally be the case in how prisons are supposed to function. You'd only give a job like this to someone who's been there a long time, probably has a long sentence to serve. In the case of Wandsworth, it has a very unusual prison population. About 1,600 men are there. Half of those are foreign nationals awaiting extradition. Most of them are there for very brief periods of time before they're extradited. And then you have a population, the other half, which is primarily remand prisoners and men who have been sentenced. So in the case of Wandsworth, someone who's been there for 9 months on remand is an old-timer. Also, things shifted during COVID and clearly haven't changed back. So now people are often on remand for really lengthy periods of time, in many cases over a year. Prisons do allow them to work and to pursue education because you can't be holding someone for a year, or maybe a year and a half awaiting trial and expect them to just do nothing but stare at all the four walls of their cell all day.
Now, fingers are being pointed at prison governor Katie Price there. Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, hasn't said he's got confidence in her. He's waiting to find out about what's happened through the investigations. What about you? What did you think of that governor? What do you think of that governor?
So Katie Price wasn't actually the number one governor when I was there. I think it's very understandable the government, the MOJ, are going to try to put the blame on the prison management, and clearly they have failed horrendously here. However, we shouldn't imagine for a moment that Wandsworth is a one-off. There are problems all over the prison system of horrendous understaffing, prisons operating with 30 or 40% of staff unavailable at any one time,
Oops, it looks like David Shipley has just frozen there. But we can come back into the studio because we've got fantastic people here in the studio looking at today's paper. We've got former Labour party advisor, Matthew Lazar, and also Director General of the IEA, Mark Littlewood there. So what he's saying was how shocking the prisons are run. And I have got some of a catalogue of, I can only say, catastrophes in Wandsworth going back to September 29. Officer arrested for making duplication of keys, handing it to the inmates. September 2019, prison officer jailed for smuggling £90,000 worth of drugs into prison. A lot going on there, Mark.
Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, I suppose, without absolving anybody of responsibility here, I always feel a bit sorry for people whose basic job is security. I think of this every time I go through an airport. It must be so boring to spend your entire life checking a million things only to find the one thing that goes wrong. That doesn't absolve these prisoners of responsibility at all. I mean, he shouldn't have got anywhere close to escaping. He's clearly a wily and cunning character. I don't know how often it is the case that an escaped prisoner is still on the run 4 days later as well. We usually catch up with them that day or the next day. So God only knows if we'll ever track him down.
We'll be speaking to Danny from Hunted later to see what you should be doing.
What do you think about
this? You can be on the run for that long without being detected.
In terms of taking responsibility, I mean, in the past years ago, it was the Home Secretary would fall on that sort of...
When George Blake sprang from Wandsworth.
I mean, who do you think should be held responsible for this?
Well, I think you're right that, I mean, in the old days, politicians would have taken immediate responsibility, but now everything is at arm's length. That was literally a principle introduced at the end of the Tory government in the 80s. But I think that clearly, immediately, this prison is in a right mess, as we've just heard, and the prison service itself needs to take responsibility. I mean, I would say that we were always told that the problems were only with private prisons. This is going to make quite a right-wing comment here, but clearly, go for it, Matthew. I mean, Wandsworth's an old-school one, still run by the government, and there are trouble. There's trouble there. So I think it reminds us that it's not who runs it, but how it's run that ultimately matters.
And remember, a similar escape was in February 2019 from that same prison. But Mark, what's your story?
Well, we heard about it in the news bulletin, Esther, and I know probably a good number of your viewers might sort of yawn at this, but I want to try and make it sound interesting and important.
Yeah, please don't have them switch it off.
This is Rishi Sunak out in India. Are we going to get a trade deal with India? And I'm quite excited about this. The Prime Minister has made no promises. Doubt anything's going to happen before the election. Could be a long, slow burn. But now Brexit is done, we've got to pivot to the growing economies in the world. India is a great opportunity for us, nearly $4 trillion of GDP, English language ubiquitous, and I hope we can improve our trade relations. I'll just say one thing. The media always talks about, are we going to get a deal done? As if the only important thing in a relationship is some huge document signed by both Prime Ministers. It's got to be a much more to and fro process than that. Perhaps we can agree a few things now while Rishi Sunak is out there, not other things, and we'll have to revisit those next year or the year after. But in what's been bleak economic times, this is an opportunity for growth in Britain.
It seems the sticking point is visas.
The sticking point is visas, yes.
And what's your view about that?
I'm actually quite liberal on immigration. I think we sometimes talk too much about the numbers rather than the type. And I'm quite keen for Indian computer programmers and cab drivers and the rest.
So who would you stop?
But they've got to be housed, haven't they? It's like being liberal on immigration, but they've got to be housed, and we can't house the number of people who are currently coming.
Well, I think you've got to pay for yourself, and to house them, Phil, it would be no problem at all if the current government would just relax the planning laws somewhat. We can actually build houses.
But you're having more and more and more.
There's not a fixed stock of housing in the United Kingdom.
You did say it was the type, not the number.
Yeah.
The type, not the number. So if it's highly qualified, adding to the country, they can come in.
We've got unqualified immigration of unqualified people on the south coast of England. So yeah, if you're going to do a deal with India on migration, then you need to sort out the flow of illegal migration that we're suffering.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm going to stick together two stories here, both from the Guardian actually, but they're not perhaps typical Guardian stories.
Was that to balance up your right-wing comments?
Absolutely. I mean, in case my comrades are waking up and listening. And I'm not going to be cancelled by the Labour Party. They basically both have the same discussion point, which is, should we trust doctors and medical professionals less? And clearly in the light of the tragic events that we saw with the court case a few weeks ago. So Bahani Siroi, who's the president of the oncology at the Royal Medical Society, has said that we're basically missing cancer symptoms in under 50s. People are going to the doctors and they're just being... And apparently a lot of people are being sent for therapy, for talking therapy, rather than actually having a physical examination. Now, I wonder how much of that is because the talking therapy starts with the doctor because they're doing it on the phone and they're not being seen, they're not being given a physical examination. And the other story is that Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, wants to adopt what I thought we were all entitled to a second opinion anyway. But apparently there's the actual enshrining in law the right to a second opinion, which has made a big difference in Australia, particularly with kids. So there's some cases they want to bring here. So should we question our doctors more?
Well, we were having that discussion ourselves, and we thought you are entitled to a second opinion. So it might not be enshrined in law, but you can have a second opinion.
It's the old Ken Dodd joke, isn't it? He said, I went to the doctor and he diagnosed me with cancer. I said, can I have a second opinion? He said, yeah, you're ugly as well.
Well, I actually had that.
Boom.
In that I was initially diagnosed by somebody with cancer, and then after another set of tests 3 weeks later, they changed their minds.
You were diagnosed with cancer, and they said they got it wrong.
They said they had to confirm it, but it was the other way around.
Diagnosis is so complicated.
Yeah, isn't it? We're going to get artificial intelligence to solve
to do it. To do everything is going to be solved by artificial intelligence.
Now, the question in the Daily Mail is about page 19, the inside story of how Prime Minister Truss was driven out of office by the Blob, raising the question, who runs Britain? Obviously, we've just had the first anniversary of Liz Truss becoming Prime Minister. Do you buy this, Mark, that she was driven out of office by the Blob?
Pretty much, yes, actually.
And who do you class as the Blob?
Yeah, well, I think it's called the Blob simply because it is so amorphous, right? If you could actually point to a particular institution...
But equally, explain how close you are to Liz Truss.
Yeah, I've known her for many years, and I agree with her on many points, and certainly her analysis of what's going wrong in Britain. I was very disappointed that a number of the things that she wanted to do didn't get off the launch pad. But I think when we talk about the Blob, we're talking about sort of rather amorphous institutions and civil servants and the rest of it, who aren't specifically colluding, but have a mindset which is very pro-status quo. And going a bit back to the prison service, and we're not quite sure who's in charge or who falls on their sword when something goes wrong, same seems to apply really to running the British economy. We have the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, who are sort of supposed to be the neutral referees in this game of economics, whose numbers are treated as if they are objectively accurate rather than opinions. I think you've got a Treasury, which is doesn't model the economy in the right way, and a civil service which is too powerful and influential. And I think it's very difficult to get radical reform through, whether of a trust type or a different...
But is Trussonomics over?
No, I don't think so. I think that actually, with each day that passes, a good degree of her analysis that the government's too big, taxes are too high and growth is woeful is being proven correct.
The thing is, though, Mark, you're the Institute of Economic Affairs. You always champion the free market. Mm-hmm. Wasn't it the markets that brought her down? It was the markets who said that they didn't believe that her budget was credible that led to the pound falling off of and all the rest of it and all the consequences of that, and that led to the sort of huge drop in the opinion polls. It was about 35 points down in the polls. So the people that you champion, the markets, weren't they the ones who brought it down, not the Blob?
Well, in part, there's some truth in that, but I think it was really a political issue. I mean, one of the things that apparently the regime had to go for, the administration had to fall for, was that bond rates had gone up. This was supposedly the markets have lost confidence in the government. Well, the bond rates are now higher than they were when Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng had to go, and I don't see any sign of Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt going. I wish that they had done a bit more a year ago to talk about how they were going to get spending under control, not just taxes down, because you've got to show that you're going to find some way of balancing the books, not just big giveaways and big tax giveaways.
So what do you think of the 2 or 3 things that Rishi Sunak has to do before next October if he genuinely is going to turn things round?
Yeah, the real problem here is I would like to see a lot of deregulation, but that usually takes a year, 2 years before you actually get the merits of it. So I think he's got to get spending under control so he can cut taxes.
Who do you think brought Liz Truss down? Did you think it was the Blob?
Well,
do you think it was Liz Truss?
Well, I think it was Liz Truss, and it was actually a lot of it was the Tory party, because as Mark says on the politics of it, on the tax cut for high earners, it was Tory MPs going back to their constituencies. You'll remember this, both of you. You know, the day after the budget, and people were saying, "Hang on, it's really tough times for families like mine. Why are you giving those earning over 150,000 a tax cut?" So I think politics ultimately brought it down. Whenever I hear the phrase "the Blob," though, it gives me terrible. It triggers terrible memories, because when I was at the BBC, I had to make a film about the Blob. It was in education, and we ended up illustrating it by filming strawberry jam. Was the only way you could actually visualise what the Blob was.
I was going to say Liz Truss isn't finished. Trussonomics isn't over. Rachel Reeves has stolen it.
Look, I think I don't think Rachel's going to do Trussonomics. Growth is important, and we haven't had enough of it over the last 13 years.
Just in a word, one word, who would the Labour Party wish they were taking on at the next election? Johnson, Truss or Sunak?
I think probably Truss, Sunak and Johnson in that order.
Right, so Johnson is the one they wouldn't want to be taking on.
Yes, despite everything that happened at the time, there was still a residual fear.
Very interesting. Matthew Lazar, Mark Littlewood, thank you very much. We'll see you in the next hour. Up next, are Britons as a whole a bunch of socialists? A new poll seems to think so. We'll be back in a moment.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know
that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10:25. Your views have been coming in thick and fast already. Esther?
This one here on the prison escape. Andrew saying you can't make straps under the vehicle and tie them when you're going at 30 miles an hour. Plus, he would have had to have got off at the very first opportunity when the van stopped. He's questioned it all. How did it happen? Where did he get the straps from? And he would have got off immediately. Wouldn't have gone all the way to the coast or anything.
Purcell says, what I find strange is they said he's got a black T-shirt, baseball cap and a small suitcase. Well, he never took them out with him, so where's he got them from? He must have been met outside by somebody and have a phone. Keep those views coming in. Now, new polling research by Lord Ashcroft shows the majority of Britons think the country is broken and suggests we've become a nation of socialists. How can this be so?
Well, joining us now to discuss this is the Professor of Politics at the University of Kent, Matthew Goodwin. So do you think that's the truth? After some people would say 2 years of lockdown, having been paid to sit at home with the state telling us all what to do, we are all now socialists because we've been groomed into it.
Well, good morning, Esther. Great to be with you. I wouldn't say that we are all socialists. I would certainly say that a surprisingly large number of Brits today do agree with what we might call left-wing economic policies. They're pretty comfortable with the state playing a big role in our lives when it comes to things like the NHS, when it comes to things like running public utilities. They'd much rather those things, for example, are taken back into the hands of the state, another thing that Lord Ashcroft's research shows. But crucially, Esther, and I know you know this from your own campaigning over the years, on many social issues, on many cultural issues, the British public actually lean in a much more conservative direction. They want to lower immigration, they want to get tough on crime, they want to prioritise the interests of the national community over big business, globalization, and so on. And that's definitely not a socialist position. So I think it's more of a mixed bag, if you like.
What about this one, Matthew, here in Lord Ashcroft's polling? I was shocked by this. He asked the question, he put the proposition, it is more important that divisions between the rich and poor are reduced, even if that means the national economy grows more slowly in the long term. And 63% of people said that they agreed with that. It seems as if people are quite happy for the country to be poorer. As long as the rich get poorer faster, then the poor get poorer. It seems an extraordinary situation that 63% would agree with that premise.
Well, I think what you can see there is really people's concerns over, firstly, the current cost of living crisis, a squeeze on living standards, the sharpest deterioration in living standards for half a century, if not more. And so those concerns over inequality have certainly come back to the fore. We know in the national polling the economy is the top issue consistently ahead of the NHS and immigration. And we know that many voters out there do feel that the economy is rigged to favour a small number of people, whether that's Londoners, whether it's the city, whether it's the sort of middle-class professionals. And of course, it was this concern, we tend to forget, but it was this concern that powered Jeremy Corbyn in 2017. But it was also this concern that helped power things like Brexit. A lot of the Brexit voters were very concerned about economic and geographical inequality in this country too. Look, the question for me is, the winning formula in British politics today is to lean a little bit to the left on economic issues. That doesn't mean embracing redistribution, but it does mean making the economy fairer. It does mean clamping down on crony capitalism, and leaning a little bit to the right on cultural issues, lowering immigration, getting tough on crime, stopping the boats, all those sorts of things. Now, neither party really has been able to tap into that fully. We've seen the Conservatives struggle to maintain that position that they had in 2019. Labour, I would argue, certainly haven't really convinced voters yet on the social and the cultural stuff. And so we're just sort of stuck in this limbo land, really, where a lot of voters out there who might otherwise be inspired to vote are probably, I would bet, going to stay at home at the next election.
Matthew, let me run this one past you. People should provide for themselves and not expect the government to provide for them. Only 25% of people said that they agreed with that sort of, in effect, Thatcherite view of the world. If we'd have asked these questions 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, would that percentage have been radically different? Is this a new phenomenon, or is this something that was always the case?
Yeah, well, if you look at some of the long-term surveys that we have in this country, like the British Social Attitude Survey, that would suggest that over the last 20 to 30 years, the British public have generally moved a bit more to the left when it comes to these questions around the economy and our relationship with the state. So there's a bit of evidence to suggest, for example, they've come a bit more supportive of the state playing a big role in our lives. They've become a bit less receptive to the idea that this is all, we should really put individual personal responsibility, ahead of everything. And now the question is that a short-term sort of cohort effect that's going to be with us with a particular generation, or is this the beginning of a longer-term shift in British psychology? I don't think it's simply because we've gone through COVID and the lockdowns. I don't think it's simply because we've gone through the financial crash. I think there's something much deeper going on here, which has been building for a much longer period of time. And of course, for Conservatives, especially at the more, you might say, libertarian end of the Conservative Party, just listening to your conversation with Mark Littlewood a minute ago, this makes it very difficult to get those arguments across about individual responsibility and the need to roll back the state.
Matthew, just very quickly, we've got two big by-elections coming up, Tamworth and Mid-Bedfordshire. The bookmakers have got Labour as the clear favourites in Tamworth, but they don't really seem to know what to do in Mid-Bedfordshire. They've got all three parties pretty close together there. What's your prediction for both of those by-elections?
We have to be very quick now.
Very quick. Who's going to win? Who's going to win Mid-Bedfordshire? Who's going to win Tamworth?
Yeah, well, I'm afraid to say on current by-election swings of what we've seen over the last couple of months, they're going to be probably very difficult nights for the Conservatives, I think. We're seeing swings we haven't seen since the mid to late 1990s.
Matt Goodwin, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and also the point that he raised that the Conservatives weren't coming out to vote, and that was the key thing. But you were horrified with these polls from Lord Ashcroft. We were going through that, and you said, look at that, look at the state dependency that's going on.
Absolutely.
But look, coming up, over 1,300 council workers have been working from abroad. Has the post-COVID remote working culture gone too far?
Plus, we've got that exclusive interview with the son of famous democracy campaigner Aung San Suu Kyi. That's all coming back after this short break.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So it's been a fairly hot week across the UK, and that's not going to change too much as we start the weekend. We've got those isobars still pretty spread out, so bringing us some light winds and still that southerly air across the south. Looking further north, though, we have got this area of cloud and rain pushing into the far northwest, and some low cloud mist and fog through the Irish Sea. But elsewhere, plenty of sunny skies, and we will start to see some thunderstorms developing as we go into this afternoon, especially across central parts of England, but also into Northern Ireland and later southern Scotland. Now, as we go into this evening, those showers will slowly start to decay and we might see the odd patch of mist and fog developing in the north and west. But looking down towards the southwest, we've got this area of heavy showers and some thunderstorms too, pushing northeastwards, and that's going to be during another warm and humid night. So to start Sunday, we're going to have those showers and thunderstorms slowly pushing through Wales into the Midlands northeastwards throughout Sunday morning, later affecting northern England and Northern Ireland as well as parts of southern Scotland. And there is a thunderstorm warning out for that. And it will be another warm day, especially across the south. They're starting to feel a little cooler in the north.
That warm feeling inside. From boxed boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
Please stop. Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But bomb.
And action.
Sergeant read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes, and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio, and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. The time now is 10:38. Reports say local government bosses have allowed over 1,350 requests to work from abroad over in just 3 years.
Research from the Taxpayers Alliance found that council workers were operated from as far away as Jamaica, Egypt and Indonesia.
The revelations have raised further questions about the post-COVID remote working culture, taxpayers' value for money and productivity.
Well, we're joined now by Elliot Keck from the Taxpayers Alliance. Elliot, thanks for joining us.
Morning.
Seems quite extraordinary, some of these things, to be honest. How did you find this out? What made you ask this question about working from the beach and people working from abroad?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Listen, I think everybody knows that since the pandemic, there has been this change in working practices. We've broadly accepted a more flexible hybrid way of working, where working from home 2-3 days a week was becoming more prevalent. But what we were interested in, given the number of councils that quite frankly had completely empty offices, was whether or not there were council staff that were thinking, well, if I don't have to come in at all, you know, that my friend's house in Sardinia might be a quite nice place to work from. So we FOI'd all councils, and lo and behold, this was not actually a pandemic issue. Very few people were working from abroad during the core years of the pandemic. This is really a very, very recent thing.
Post-pandemic, because nobody's gone back to work, so they've seen people not going into work. And I can say that walking around many buildings, I've been shocked with how empty they are. Are they balancing out the productivity? Are they figuring out if they're away? Are they getting the work done? Because I can tell you from constituents, no, they are not.
I think when you look at the way that local government and central government is being run, and is being run post-pandemic, I think it's very difficult to conclude that productivity isn't suffering. Now, there will be very good reasons why council staff are being permissioned to work abroad. Maybe it's a very, very senior member of staff that is actually on holiday, but who is given permission to sign into emails for emergency reasons, or maybe it's someone going abroad for care reasons. So there are genuine reasons, but I think the massive, massive growth in numbers, some of the locations that you look at, and the fact that councils are seeing services suffer. Let's take Cheshire East Council, where they recently announced a cut to the number of library opening hours, and they've got 7 staff working abroad, or Bradford Council, who have 49 staff working abroad.
Just taken by Roundup, my area and Phil's area.
Where they've announced that they need to find tens of millions of pounds to make up a shortfall from their reserves. So I think it's difficult to conclude that services aren't suffering, and that one of the reasons will be some of these more flexible attitudes to working.
Is this something unique to councils, or is this happening across the public sector, do we think?
As far as I'm aware, I'm not sure what's going on in the rest of the public sector. We are currently actively looking into other public sector bodies to see if this is happening. We've only looked at it on the council level. We know that it does happen in the private sector, but as was always the case of the private sector, it's shareholders who suffer, but in the case of the public sector, it's taxpayers.
I guess some people would say, look, does it matter where they're working from? As long as they're getting the job done, does it really matter whether they're at home, in Starbucks, in Egypt, in the council building? Does it really matter, as long as they're getting the job done?
I think, you know, the case with local government, and it's case with central government as well, it really helps being in the local area to know the local issues. If you're not spending time in your local area speaking to local people, that's going to harm your ability to understand how to best respond to issues. It's also about, are you maintaining that sense of collegiality, that sense of togetherness that workplaces really benefit from. So it doesn't necessarily matter always, but when you're working abroad, often for years at a time, it's very difficult to believe that you're engaging as effectively.
Well, put it this way, our viewers have been writing in thick and fast, and John says, well, your point there, beggars belief that councils aren't local, knowing what's going on, and that taxpayers' funds are being used for people sunning up on the beaches. Great comment from Dave, though. He said the only people who should be working on the beach are deck chair attendants, not council workers.
Ice cream people selling ice cream, Yeah, I mean, it is quite extraordinary. Elliot, thank you so much for coming in and sharing this information with us. I was staggered when I saw it. It's one of those things that I often say to people that the one thing I've learned since being in Parliament is all the things that you think couldn't possibly be happening are almost certainly happening. And you've just proved that all the things that you think couldn't possibly happen are almost certainly happening.
I also said, when you said, why did he start doing this as a bit of research, I thought maybe he'd been away on holiday working for a beach, and then he thought maybe other people were. It was personal experience. But I will also say we did a poll on Twitter here, and it was, should people work from a beach? Should they be allowed? Should the local councils allow it or not? And 84% of those people who voted in that poll said absolutely not.
Well, trust the GBNews.
They need to be at work.
Exactly. Elliot, thanks ever so much indeed for that.
Now, in an exclusive interview that we've got today, I will say it is a world first on TV, is the son of former Myanmar, but others will know it as Burma, leader Aung San Suu Kyi's son we've got with us.
With all the focus on Ukraine, what's been happening in Burma has not had the attention it might have had.
Democracy campaigner Aung San Suu Kyi has been imprisoned by the military dictatorship that has taken over Burma. And we're delighted to now say that we are joined in the studio by her son, Kim Aris. So, first of all, the things that your mum has been through, pretty much in some sort of imprisonment, it seems, for great part of her life, and back there now in prison. How is she? What is happening? What sort of treatment has she got? You are a son. Are you allowed to see her?
No, I'm not allowed to see her. I haven't had any contact with her for the last 2.5 years. Any requests that I've made to the military have just come back blank. They don't answer me. And I don't really know where she's been held. There were rumours that the military were trying to circulate, saying that she had been moved to some form of house arrest. This was back in July. That is evidently not the case. And at the moment, as far as I'm aware, she has been unable to eat due to gum problems and teeth issues, potentially problems with wisdom tooth. And she's been vomiting and dizzy, and that's about as much as I know. The information I get is nothing more than what's available publicly, since I don't have any direct contact with her. And the lawyers aren't allowed to see her. Nobody is allowed to see her.
Is she still alive?
As far as I'm aware, I hope so. But until somebody can actually see her and verify that, I don't know.
So nobody's verified that? We don't know that?
No. The only spokespeople are military spokespeople or prison spokespeople, so we cannot rely on that information.
And as a son, this has been your relationship with your mum pretty much all your life, hasn't it? She's been in some form of prison because she stood up for democracy.
Ultimately, in the past, when she was first put under house arrest, I was actually with her. You know, I was 12 years old at the time, and I was allowed to stay with her for a period under a form of semi-house arrest. But over the years, occasionally they would allow me to visit her and stay with her and even send care packages and letters. But over the last 2.5 years, we've had none of that, and she's been denied access to her personal doctor and dentist. So I can't imagine what sort of state that she's in that prison, because the prisoners there are not treated well, and she does not accept preferential treatment.
Did you have to collect her Nobel Peace Prize for the work she'd done because she was still locked up?
She was still locked up at that time, yes. My brother and I, as well as my father, went to collect that.
Now, you're a British citizen, Kim. Has the UK government been doing enough to try and get you access to her with the regime in Burma?
I'm afraid to say there's very little the British government can do. They don't have a relationship with the regime which is workable. And whilst they are trying to get some communication from me through to my mother, it will be hard to do so. They put many blockages in place. The military don't make it easy.
Does anybody have a working relationship, though, with the military?
Well, I hear the Russians and the Chinese to some degree. I'm not sure who
And
else,
why is that?
really. Well, it's business, isn't it?
And can I talk about, as well, the poverty? People might not quite understand what is going on in Myanmar, the poverty there, how many people do not have money, how the militia is treating
Well, there's
them.
18 million people in need of urgent care in Burma at the moment. Proper humanitarian aid, which has been denied them because any aid that goes in through official channels ends up helping the military, not the people who need it.
Now, obviously, your mum's hugely popular in Burma, but that has come at a price, spending much of her life in prison or under house arrest. I mean, what has it been like being her son? Winning Nobel Peace Prizes, having her under house arrest, in prison, all the acclaim she's had around that. I mean, what is it like being her son?
It can be a bit of a roller coaster at times and quite tough, but I guess after however many years it is now, over 30 years, you get kind of used to it and just get on with your day.
But given that you are her son, are you going to carry on the family tradition and take on her mantle as a democracy campaigner in Burma, as she did from her dad?
Well, I'm not going to let Burma slide back further and further as it is now. I hope to help it move forwards like my mother has done. I don't really consider myself a democracy campaigner, but I shall certainly be making people aware of what's happening.
And how do you intend to carry on that mantle? How in that sense?
I shall be setting up some campaigns and a charity to help with humanitarian aid.
Now, I know you've brought in this picture. I think that's dear to you, so if you can explain it to us and lift it up for the cameras.
Well, this was when I was leaving Burma. This was just after my mother had been released from house arrest. And I went to see her, and I'd had this tattoo whilst I was waiting in Bangkok, which is the flag that you see there, the flag of the National League for Democracy. And I revealed it to the world when I arrived in Rangoon Airport, and to my mother, obviously.
And you're leading there, and maybe that was a vision there, that you will be taking on her message going forward. That is you leading her out. I have to say that she, such a distinguished character that she is, she did actually address both Houses of both Houses of Parliament, sorry. Very few people get to do that because of her fight for democracy. So she was obviously invited to the mother of all democracies, our House of Parliament. Why do you think it is so important to her, and why should it be so important for the people of Burma and Myanmar? Democracy.
Democracy, well, I think it's the only chance of actually having proper human rights in Burma is when democracy is achieved. Because at the moment, there is no rule of law. There's no doing business with Burma because it's just completely corrupt. Yeah.
There was a period when she was in charge of Burma, in between the military being in charge. She did receive criticism over her silence about the persecution of the Rohingya people. Do you think she regrets that from her time in office?
I'm not sure she really was silent. I think she was trying to work things through in a way that didn't result in a bloodbath like what's happening now. And there were very few options open to her at that time. Nobody else has come up with any other suggestions as to what other path she could have taken, really, that I think are sensible suggestions anyway.
OK, so, I mean, what is your message to the world about what's happening in Burma? What is it you think that the West, the countries in the West, could or should do? What should other countries be doing in order to try and rectify what's happening and try and secure the release of your mum?
Well, people around the world can start trying to make their governments act meaningfully, and that would involve imposing more sanctions on the military, stopping their access to aviation fuel, maybe imposing sanctions on some of the countries that are working with the military. I don't know, there must be many things that they could be doing to help the situation that they're not.
And why do you think there is... I mean, I said at the start that because of what's happening in Ukraine, maybe attention's fallen away from places like Burma. Is that what you think? Do you think that's why there isn't the focus on Burma that perhaps there should be?
It's partly that. I think even Ukraine is no longer the focus that it once was, and people don't like to be faced with horrors like this all day, every day. They want to be able to get on with their lives and not think about what's going on over the other side of the world.
And what would your existence be like if you're a regular person in Burma? What is your day-to-day existence like?
I'm afraid I couldn't tell you since I'm not there. And it depends who you are and where you are in Burma. Some people are still able to lead fairly normal lives, I believe. Others are running away in the jungle with nothing.
Now, finally, Kim, on a slightly different topic, people might not know, but you engage in a sport which is Burmese boxing, I think it is, which is... it sounds pretty brutal from what I... Tell us about Burmese boxing and make the world aware of what Burmese boxing is.
Burmese boxing's like Thai boxing, but better at the end of the day, because we use headbutts and we don't use gloves. So otherwise, it's pretty much the same.
Well, you're going to have to use some of that fighting to get out there. But look, I love the T-shirt. No one is free until everyone is free. And the reason that is so important is because we have our freedoms and we don't realise how lucky we are, and yet you are fighting for people. I know we've spoke separately, and when you told me, like you say, most people are running away, hiding in the jungle because it is brutal what they go through. They have no money, and most people are in absolute poverty.
The military use
there.
fighter jets on innocent villages and then come back and shoot the people trying to reclaim their bodies.
Brutal.
And shoot them as well. Yeah.
Kim, thank you so much for taking the time to come and tell us about the plight of your mum. We obviously wish her well. We wish you well with your campaigning for democracy in Burma, and trust that people don't forget about her plight and what she's basically, in effect, given up in order to fight for democracy in her country. We sort of salute her courage and yours in sticking up for her. So thank you for coming and sharing that story with us.
Coming up with yesterday marking 1 year since the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, how well is King Charles doing as a monarch? Well, Michael Cole, royal correspondent, joins us shortly.
We'll be back.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So it's been a fairly hot week across the UK, and that's not going to change too much as we start the weekend. We've got those isobars still pretty spread out, so bringing us some light winds and still that southerly air across the south. Looking further north, though, we have got this area of cloud and rain pushing into the far northwest and some low cloud mist and fog through the Irish Sea. But elsewhere, plenty of sunny skies, and we will start to see some thunderstorms developing as we go into this afternoon, especially across central parts of England, but also into Northern Ireland and later southern Scotland. Now, as we go into this evening, those showers will slowly start to decay, and we might see the odd patch of mist and fog developing in the north and west. But looking down towards the southwest, we've got this area of heavy showers and some thunderstorms too, pushing northeastwards, and that's going to be during another warm and humid night. So to start Sunday, we're going to have those showers and thunderstorms slowly pushing through Wales into the Midlands northeastwards throughout Sunday morning, later affecting northern England and Northern Ireland as well as parts of southern Scotland. And there is a thunderstorm warning out for that. And it will be another warm day, especially across the south. They're starting to feel a little cooler in the north.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6 is Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. Now, the great escape, Daniel Khalif, is still on the run, but it seems that the nets are closing in on him. But we'll be speaking to Danny from Hunted to find out how she would be hunting him down right now.
Earlier this week, Labour said that they wanted to cut the cost of school uniforms for parents, so it made us think, should we have a debate about this? Are school uniforms out of date, too expensive and elitist? Should they be scrapped altogether, or are they an essential part of school discipline? We will be having that debate in this hour.
They're certainly too expensive, and if you were anything like me, you had a skirt that went to the floor, rolled it up, and it lasted you for many years. We've also got a royal roundup. What a week it's been, whether it's King Charles' first year on the throne and also how we all commemorated Queen Elizabeth II yesterday. We'll be speaking to royal correspondent Michael Cole for the latest. Oh yes, and also news about Harry and Meghan.
And it's Saturday morning, so it will be time for our favourites, Aidan McGee and Hayley Palmer in this hour too. Massive weekend of sport with the Rugby World Cup, the Football Internationals, the US Open, lots and lots to discuss, and we'll be discussing everything with Aidan and Hayley just before the end of the show.
I'm laughing because you'll be on the sofa all weekend with popcorn.
I will. And of course, we want to hear what you think about all of these things. So email us gbviews@gbnews.com. Tell us which sport you'll be watching all weekend, like I will be doing on the sofa, annoying Esther as usual. But anyway, before all of that, here's the news headlines with Tamsin.
Phil, thanks very much, and good morning from the GB newsroom. It's 1 minute past 11. Police are focusing on the Chiswick area of West London for an escaped terror suspect after receiving confirmation of sightings overnight. Former soldier Daniel Khalif escaped from Wandsworth Prison on Wednesday by strapping himself to the bottom of a food delivery van. A close relative of Khalif is urging him to give himself up. Police are offering a £20,000 reward for any information that may lead to his arrest. He's believed to be wearing a black baseball cap, black T-shirt and dark colour bottoms and carrying a small bag or case. Well, former counter-terrorism officer Chris Phillips told GB News the police heavily rely on the public.
I think they're following up leads, and I think that's all they can do, really, is he would clearly have got away quite quickly from the roundabout, Wandsworth roundabout, when he got from the bottom of the van. And then is which direction did he go? And then it's really just following up leads, following up contacts, people that he knew. He may well have contacts in Chiswick that the police have been looking at. And of course, the key one here is members of the public. Members of the public are the eyes and ears of the police in this kind of situation.
Well, our GB News presenter Bev Turner has been in the Chiswick area where police are focusing their search this morning. Bev, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. Now, just tell us what you've seen happening there this morning.
Morning, Tamsin. So I was out for a run this morning, and it's a very leafy residential area. We've got Chiswick train station behind me. The Thames is just down the road where I was running. And on the way back, it was clear that there were helicopters all over the sky, lots of police cars, lots of undercover police cars as well. And I just stopped one and I said, we're all looking for him. And she put her window down and she said, he's been seen here 5 minutes ago in this area. Black outfit, black baseball cap, black bag. She said, if you see him, you call 999 immediately. And then she went off. So that was at 10:15 this morning. There are some unconfirmed reports that a lot of the police cars have moved towards the Chiswick Bridge area, and even then round to Kew Bridge, which is the next bridge along on the Thames here. But everybody's going around their business. Lots of families are out, lots of people cycling, lots of people running this morning. But obviously, everybody here is being incredibly vigilant.
Bev, thanks very much for joining us this morning. We'll let you get back to your weekend. And as Bev was saying there, this is a developing story, so we will, of course, keep you up to date with any news on this as we get it here at GB News. To other news now. The Foreign Secretary says the UK is supporting British nationals after more than 800 people have died and more than 300 have been injured in the Morocco earthquake. The quake, measuring 6.8 magnitude, struck the high Atlas Mountains yesterday. Its impact was felt in cities across the country. Residents of Marrakesh, the nearest big city to the epicentre, have been forced to camp after buildings crumbled. Many houses were damaged and a rescue operation is underway. One resident from Casablanca says he couldn't believe what was happening.
The house rocked aggressively. Everyone was scared and I was shocked and I didn't understand what was happening. I thought it was only my house that was moving because it's fragile and old. I heard people screaming. Everyone went out of their homes. The street is full of people and women screaming. That's what's happened. Even now, people can't go back home because they're still afraid because of the last hit. The first hit, we didn't feel it. People can't go back to their houses because they're still afraid. Because of the second hit, I think it's a 7 magnitude.
The Prime Minister says there's been enormous progress towards a free trade agreement with India. Just a warning of flashing images coming up. Rishi Sunak is meeting his Indian counterpart, President Modi, for bilateral discussions, but he's refused to commit to having a trade agreement in place before the next election. He also says he won't be pressuring India's Prime Minister to end his policy of neutrality to Russia. 16 police officers have been injured after seizing explosives and weapons in Londonderry. Crowds attacked the officers as searches were carried out in the Cregan area. Handguns, money, grenades, ammunition and plastic explosives were discovered. 2 men and a woman have been arrested. Authorities say their main focus is on the new IRA. Today is expected to be the hottest day of the year so far, hitting 33 degrees Celsius in southern England. It follows the past 5 days of temperatures above 30 degrees in September for the first time. Forecasters say the record is likely to continue until the end of this week, with an amber heat alert in place. In addition to the heat, the Met Office says central Britain could face potential thunderstorms later today. TV comedian and impersonator Mike Yarwood has died at the age of 82. He became a household name in the 60s and 70s with his impersonations of politicians and other public figures. The Royal Variety charity says Mike Yarwood has left behind an immeasurable void in the entertainment industry, and tributes have been pouring in this morning. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now, though, it's back to Esther and Phil.
Thanks there, Tamsin.
Yeah, obviously very interesting to see Bev Turner there in Chiswick, wasn't it?
Always in the thick of things is our Bev. Always in the thick of things.
The thing that struck me about it was that Bev was on the run as well as the person who'd escaped from Wandsworth. I also thought it was staggering. He escaped from Wandsworth prison. Was it 4 days ago? And he's made it as far as Chiswick. He hasn't got very far, is it? I had sort of a vision that he'd be halfway across Europe by now, and he's made it all the way from Wandsworth to Chiswick. He doesn't seem to be.
Maybe that just shows how difficult it is to move around unobserved.
Yes.
I mean, people said if he got into, say, Richmond Parks or one of the parks, no CCTV there, he could hide undercover, maybe dig himself underground. And lucky for him, he had good weather. So he could have done that. Maybe he's thinking, lie low, stay local before I clear off. I don't know, I haven't run away.
It might just be a reflection of how terrible our public transport is.
But of course, the hero of the week has to be the guy who was mistaken for him in Banbury train station, and he's taken the whole thing in good heart. And I loved how the sort of Twitter was trying to whip up a police brutality story, and instead, they were very nice, and we had a bit of a joke and a flirt with the British Transport Police.
I don't think I've named you this hour, but I will. Matthew Lazar, there's you. Mark Littlewood over there, there's you, Director General of the IEA. So go on, what else have you seen in the papers?
Yes, so look, I think perhaps the biggest story of the week, and it's one of those that doesn't get enough attention because it can seem a bit dry, is the research that came out yesterday about the cost of the triple lock for pensions. This is the mechanism introduced by the coalition government in 2010, whereby the state pension rises by the highest of inflation, average earnings, or 2.5%. And by committing to the highest of those three, rather than picking any one of those measures, it's going to massively add to the bill to a sort of situation where it's almost unsustainable. It's basically cost an extra 20 billion already so far since it was introduced.
Are you arguing that it should be scrapped, the triple lock, Matthew?
Well, I mean, Labour's policy is to keep it, but my personal policy would be to hitch it to average earnings. I mean, if you remember Barbara Castle, the Red Barbara was what she campaigned for years. I remember the last speech she gave at Labour conference saying, my legacy, let it be to average earnings.
But if it went through to average earnings, that would be the high.
Sometimes it isn't the highest, though. Sometimes inflation
I know,
is
but
high,
at the moment is. And everybody's concerned with either inflation or average earnings.
But it would have saved 20 billion.
But that's
over the period if you'd done average earnings. Or if you'd done either of them, it would have saved 20 billion. It's the fact you pick the highest of the three that pushes the bill so high.
Last time they said, the reason that they'd put in the 2.5% is because Labour had given like a 75p.
Because inflation was so low under Labour, that's why.
That was it.
What do you think about this, Mark? I mean, it seems there are very few people left voting Conservative. Pensioners are about the last bastion of it.
That might explain the politics.
There speaks a man who's been canvassing.
Scrapping the triple lock would be political suicide, wouldn't it, for the Conservatives?
I don't know. I think sometimes we assume too much that people are too directly venal and selfish about their own position. My parents, I mean, they're not rich, but they're affluent. They think they're both pensioners. They think the triple lock is an absolute disgrace. I mean, they'll take the money if your government is determined to shovel it into their pockets, but there's no justice here. And here's a fact to conjure with. I think it's 20% or 25% of pensioners are millionaires. The idea...
But through their homes?
Yeah, well, that's fine. That's £1 million of equity.
What pensioners would say is, well, hold on a minute, this isn't a benefit. I've been paying into the system all my working life. I'm not getting a benefit. It should be seen as a benefit. This is in effect a pension that I've been paying in for.
I've heard that story that I've been paying my national insurance stamp, and here's the money that comes out. The money that's coming out is an awful lot more than you paid in. You would not have been able to have bought this pension on the open market. So the over 60s are taking out more than they paid in aggregate. There will be some exceptions to that, but in aggregate.
Obviously everybody's
so this is the poor young subsidising the affluent rich.
Have you got another story? As Matthew said, it was a dry story.
Sorry, I was going to say there is just one political point there, which is, as you say, politically it may be toxic for the Tories. The age difference is so big in voting intentions. But if Labour was serious about making tough decisions, if Rachel Reeves does want to be the Iron Chancellor, should this be a bullet she should bite?
Well, here's another story.
And when would she announce it?
Exactly.
Here's another story about the weird and strange times we live in, and this is about the Father Ted writer, Graham Lynham, this controversial comedian. And I've had a bit of a part to play in this because my own outfit, the Institute of Economic Affairs, invited him to speak on a panel at the upcoming Conservative conference on the topic of free speech. And if you want to go to a Conservative conference, you have to apply and they check out that, you know, are you a fit and proper person, all this sort of thing. Anyway, the Tories banned him. He'd previously been banned from speaking at the Edinburgh Festival. And on first blush, the Conservative Party said, we're not going to give you any accreditation. I don't know if anybody's ever been banned by both the Edinburgh Festival and the Conservative Party within such short order. So we found that quite strange. And
what was he? What did they say he was banned for?
Well, we haven't got to the bottom of that yet.
So it might not be about free speech. It might not be about saying he might have actually kicked off at another...
Police have said something, but this man's got no criminal convictions. So we're needing to get to the bottom of that. Anyway, story has a happy ending because we approached Conservative Central Office and said, surely some mistake. And sure enough, very quickly, the Conservatives have U-turned on it. So he will be coming and he will be speaking about free speech at the Conservative conference next week.
How difficult is it for people to get to speak at the Labour Party conference?
Oh, you know, even harder still, I think. Do you remember the time when somebody was bundled out unfurling a banner, an anti-war protester in the Iraq war years? But if you really want to test it, because Labour's had a similar situation with the exhibition stands you have about whether the Labour campaign, which is sort of aligned with Graham Linehan, the Labour campaign that's critical of trans rights, so they've been denied a stall, and that's a row every year within the Labour Party, whether or not the sort of Labour against Labour lesbian group, which is sort of against trans rights, should be allowed in. So, yeah. It's not easy, the party conference.
Well, you know, we've got it. I said free speech there. There's Kim, who was on before talking about freedoms and fighting for his mum, fought for it all his life. Blummin' heck, we've got to keep it in the UK. Phil, a fun story.
Yeah, a fun story.
Is it one of your usual sex surveys, Philip?
Do you know what? Funnily enough...
I look forward to these every time I come and join you.
Funnily enough, Matthew, there actually was a sex survey story in the papers today, and I actually shied away from it today. I'm sorry to disappoint you. It was about the amount of sex that people over 50 were having, and anyway...
I'll read that later. I'll read that later.
Esther.
Actually, you know why he didn't want to do that? Because I might have contradicted what the survey said.
Apparently, men were having more sex than women over 50.
But how can that be?
Well, apparently it's. I'm not actually doing this story, but I actually.
I knew.
But I have researched it. Basically, the reason they gave was that apparently men have a shorter life expectancy than women, so men have got more women to go at, so to speak.
Oh my goodness!
It's that men exaggerate on the upside and women exaggerate on the downside.
More women to go. I'm shocked.
Moving swiftly on. You getting me into trouble here, Matthew. And the second reason was apparently it was a survey, and they reckon that men are more likely to lie about it.
Yeah, that's
Is that
and I bet women understate it as well. So men overstate and women understate
it. Absolutely right.
Anyway, that wasn't the story. Matthew, that wasn't the story. The story is this. Page 21 of the Daily Star, opposites do attract, with 1 in 5 couples claiming they have nothing in common with each other. Nearly a quarter, 24% of couples had completely different hobbies, and 14% had completely different music tastes.
Well, to be fair, that's true about us.
Right. But of the
We've
2,000,
got different hobbies, different music tastes.
Of 2,000 lovers polled, more than half say opposing relationships work, with 73% believing having different interests leads to more interesting conversations. This was a Sky Atlantic study as it launches the new series of The Lovers.
So go on, what do you think of that? So whilst I think you can do different things, you've fundamentally got to agree on things, surely.
I think actually what you want is some shared space, but also separate interests, so that it's not all about the shared space. So as you two say, if you've got different interests for other things, you've obviously got a core of stuff that interests you together.
A separate room.
I'm single, so what do I?
Matthew,
what do I know?
It's a separate room that you need, particularly at a weekend when I can go and watch the football in a different room.
Do you think you can have marriages where one couple can be of a different political persuasion to the other in a relationship? Do you think that adds to tension? Do you think you can have that?
I think that's possible. I mean, I think it's a bit different to say, look, we don't have the same hobbies, therefore we have nothing in common, right? I mean, you might sort of see the world in the same way, share the same basic moral precepts.
Are you saying that somebody who wrote the press release was
just the fact that one of you, is interested in train spotting and the other stamp collecting doesn't mean you've got nothing in common. So I think you tend to find successful couples sort of see the world through the same sort of moral lens. But from my perspective, the only prenuptial I absolutely insisted on was my partner had to switch to supporting Southampton Football Club. That was non-negotiable.
And that was Was it signed? A proper prenuptial?
Not signed, but agreed.
I'm surprised that wasn't
if it had been signed, it would have been signed in
Anyway.
blood.
I'm surprised that wasn't a deal breaker.
We've got to move on. We've other people to speak to, other things to do. Thank you both very much indeed. We'll see you shortly.
Now, coming up with yesterday marking 1 year since the passing of our beloved Queen Elizabeth II, we're joined by former BBC royal correspondent Michael Cole for your Royal Roundup.
So stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So it's been a fairly hot week across the UK and that's not going to change too much as we start the weekend. We've got those isobars still pretty spread out, so bringing us some light winds and still that southerly air across the south. Looking further north though, we have got this area of cloud and rain pushing into the far northwest and some low cloud mist and fog through the Irish Sea. But elsewhere, plenty of sunny skies and we will start to see some thunderstorms developing as we go into this afternoon, especially across central parts of England, but also into Northern Ireland and later southern Scotland. Now, as we go into this evening, those showers will slowly start to decay and we might see the odd patch of mist and fog developing in the north and west. But looking down towards the southwest, we've got this area of heavy showers and some thunderstorms too, pushing northeastwards, and that's going to be during another warm and humid night. So to start Sunday, we're going to have those showers and thunderstorms slowly pushing through Wales into the Midlands northeastwards throughout Sunday morning, later affecting northern England and Northern Ireland as well as parts of southern Scotland. And there is a thunderstorm warning out for that. And it will be another warm day, especially across the south. They're starting to feel a little cooler in the north.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel that already at it. That fighting is going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes, and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio, and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB Newsers, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. The time now is 11:23. Got loads of your views coming in on an array of subjects.
Yeah, we spoke to the son of Aung San Suu Kyi in the last hour. Les says, listening to Kim, that's her son, speak about the loss of democracy in Burma and the fight and detention of his mother, we should show support as a nation. And Val says, just to thank you for highlighting the situation in Myanmar, Burma. Christians in the north are suffering terrible persecution along with the general population. Please keep that country in people's minds.
Yeah, and he was nervous coming on the show this morning. He hasn't done a TV interview, and you know, we're just proud that he came on and talked about what he's going to do next to take on the mantle of his mother. We've also got other things here. Jackie saying, I'm sorry, but the council workers are a joke. There is no responsibility. It is a job for life. Nobody seems to get sacked or care. They can't be working from a beach. It is a disgrace. That was Jackie there.
Yeah, Angie has something similar. When councils keep raising council tax and at the same time cut back on services, it's absolutely disgraceful that staff are working abroad. They should be 5 days a week in the office or they should resign. And we also spoke to Matt Goodwin about the growing tide of socialism in a poll by Lord Ashcroft earlier this week. Victor says, if it's true that 60% would prefer more government intervention, the politics of envy and less individual responsibility, then they deserve the misery of socialism. So Victor's forthright there. Thank you.
We like that. We
Keep
like
those
that
views
a lot.
coming in. Absolutely we do.
I certainly do, because you're forthright, aren't you?
I try to be.
That was your appeal.
Was it?
Yeah.
I thought it was my boyish good looks.
And that as well. Anyway, yesterday marked a whole year since the passing of our beloved Queen Elizabeth II.
Queen Elizabeth remains in the nation's hearts and minds, but 1 year into his reign, how is King Charles faring?
Joining us now for our latest Royal Roundup is legendary former royal correspondent Michael Cole. So, can you give us a mark for King Charles out of 10 for his first year as king?
Good morning, Esther. Good morning, Philip. Yeah, a year ago, I had a letter in the Times at the invitation of the Times Letters page editor, in which I said, the morning after the death was officially announced of Her Majesty the Queen, I said that history would remember her as Elizabeth the Great, and I cited 3 instances for that. That provoked other people to write in and say, no, it should be Elizabeth the Kind and Elizabeth the Wise. So it was always going to be a very, very difficult act for her eldest son, King Charles, to follow. Of course, the monarchy evolves. It always has changed. And I think the first year of the Carolean age with King Charles has actually been accomplished very well. I would give it, to answer your absolutely pertinent question, 9 out of 10, Esther. Why 9 out of 10? Because the first address after the shock, because it was a shock, even though she was very old, the address by the king to the nation was perfectly judged, and the accession council, which we'd never ever seen before in history, was highly impressive, followed up with a very good Christmas broadcast. And since then, of course, we've had the very good, excellent state visit to Germany, during which the king spoke partly in German to the Bundestag. It was a palpable hit. Why would I reserve the full marks of 10. I thought the coronation, strangely, missed something in spirituality. I don't know why. I think it was overproduced, it was over-rehearsed, and something was missing. And I think as our Anglican Church moves further and further away from its Catholic origins, it loses something in spirituality and indeed in majesty. But I think the King's done very well. And there we are at the Accession Council, and what an amazing morning that was.
Michael, can we bring in Harry now? Do you think the King would have considered it a success that Harry was in the country yesterday, even if he did a visit to the church by himself, a sort of an unexpected one? But it would have at least been a success he was in the country. And how are those brothers? Are they ever going to get on again?
Well, we all know the story of the prodigal son. The prodigal is always welcome home, always. But there's going to have to be a very mighty big piece of humble pie eaten and some fences mended to change the illusion before that happens. And I think it's going to be extremely difficult for Prince Harry's brother, his loving brother, Prince William, to forgive him. The King perhaps less so, but Harry did something and has done and continues to do something which is a complete no-no. Most men, Philip, can put up with being insulted. I think you'll agree with me. I mean, I've been insulted by experts over the years, and it doesn't matter. A man doesn't mind being insulted. He doesn't mind two things. He doesn't mind being insulted. He doesn't want to be insulted about his wife, and that is a no-no. And also, he doesn't like his driving ability to be criticised. That's another matter. But that is really very unfortunate. Of course, there's always a chance. Prince Harry's there this morning at the Invictus Games, which he brought about in the years BM before Meghan, like the well-child thing. That was all BM before Meghan. And that's exactly the sort of thing that a royal prince should be doing. And huge congratulations to him.
And is it going down well in Germany today?
Yes, he's there in Dusseldorf. It's being promoted very much by the Bundeswehr, the German army. That's attracted some weird protests of the lefties in Germany, saying that these games for these poor, terribly injured men and women is somehow an advertisement for militarism, is somehow an advertisement in favor of war. Instead of being the exact opposite, 100%. So he's doing that. It will go well. There will be an appearance by Meghan. She will have arrived fashionably late, and I'm quite sure we will hear all about that. It is the greatest pity. You know, Esther, you've got a good family background. I'm sure you have, Philip, too. The worst thing you can ever see in the world, or one of them, is brothers fighting. It's a horrible thing wherever it occurs, and it would so upset their late dear mother. And if they really care about each other, and they have said repeatedly they do, they would get together. Now, this is commonplace advice.
Michael Cole, we'll end it there because that's on a positive note. They need to get together. They need to listen to you. I'm hoping they're watching GB News now so they know what to do next. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
Now, in just a moment, we've got the grandson of Agatha Christie ahead of the unveiling of the UK's first life-size statue of the best-selling murder mystery author. But first, here's the headlines with Tamsin.
Phil, thanks very much. Here are the headlines at 11:31. Police have told GB News there's been a confirmed sighting of escaped terror suspect Daniel Khalif in the Grove Park area of West London within the last hour. Police have been focusing their search around Chiswick in West London this morning after reported sightings overnight also. The former soldier escaped from Wandsworth Prison on Wednesday by strapping himself to the bottom of a food delivery van. He's believed to be wearing a black baseball cap, black T-shirt and dark-coloured bottoms and carrying a small bag or case. The Foreign Secretary says the UK is supporting British nationals after more than 800 people have died and more than 300 have been injured in a Morocco earthquake. The quake, measuring 6.8 magnitude, struck the high Atlas Mountains yesterday. Its impact was felt in cities across the country. Residents of Marrakesh, the nearest large city to the epicentre, have been forced to camp after buildings have crumbled there. The Prime Minister says there's been enormous progress towards a free trade agreement with India. Rishi Sunak has met his Indian counterpart, Narendra Modi, for bilateral discussions, but he's refused to commit to having a trade agreement in place before the next election. He also says he won't be pressuring India's Prime Minister to end his policy of neutrality to Russia. 16 police officers have been injured after seizing explosives and weapons in Londonderry. Crowds attacked the officers as searches were carried out in the Cregan area. Handguns, money, grenades, ammunition and plastic explosives were discovered. 2 men and a woman have been arrested. Well, you can get more on all of those stories. Just visit our website, gbnews.com.
Thanks there, Tamsin. Now, millions of children return to school this week, but for many, not so peacefully.
Parents have expressed outrage over strict school uniform policies, anger that their children are being forced to wear shoes that give them blisters and tights in the scorching heat.
So we're asking, are school uniforms essential school wear, or is it time to get rid of them? Joining us now to discuss this is editor of the Jewish Chronicle, Jake Wallace-Simons, and head teacher Christine Cunliffe. Hello to you both. So can you tell us exactly why, and I'll start with you, Christine, why, should we get rid of school uniforms?
I don't think we should. I think we should be wearing school uniform, and it doesn't have to be expensive either. I think it's respect that we all wear uniform as part of our school community and that we wear it with pride. And as I say, it doesn't have to be expensive either. And as for shoes and tights, I think many schools this week will be a little bit more lenient. So, for example, we've allowed our pupils, especially in the junior school, to come back in their summer uniform. So it's about being sensible and about reflecting the needs of your school environment.
So, Jake there, say school uniforms are a good thing. Why do you want to get rid of them?
I'm totally against school uniforms. I think they're a bad idea. Have bad memories about them myself, and I can see my children as well going through the same thing at the moment. I mean, look across the continent, look to the United States, look to Australia, look to most other countries in the world. There aren't that many actually that promote school uniforms, and their children turn out all right. They don't have a sense of social anxiety more than our kids do, and they turn generally into responsible citizens by and large. By contrast, our schools, there's such a lot of school time wasted on policing this stuff. Teachers at secondary schools in particular measuring girls' skirts.
Really, Christine, is this a load of nonsense just put about by somebody who wants to get rid of them?
No, to be quite honest with you, other countries in the world don't wear uniforms, but we are proud to be in England and wearing school uniforms. I don't believe it adds to social anxiety. I think, if you've got shoes that rub and things like that, it will get better. It's very hard to find shoes wherever you are and whatever you do in life that actually feel comfortable. And I think it needs to stay, and it can be sensible.
Jake, isn't one of the points that people make when they argue in favour of school uniform that actually it's good for parents? It might be there might be some initial cost, but actually it means that kids don't get into this sort of bullying and harassment where they haven't got the latest designer gear because their parents can't afford it, and that actually school uniform in that sense is actually a great leveller for people who go to school.
Well, that's the key argument in favour of the school uniform that we make in Britain, but I don't think it's right. I mean, kids see each other on the weekends, don't they? They change out of their school uniforms as soon as they're home. They know each other's social status by their phones, by what their parents do, by holidays, all the rest of it. It's a bit reductive to think that just because they're all forced to wear these shabby, poor quality, plasticky nylon costumes, that's going to erase their consciousness of where everybody else is in the social order. And again, you know, teachers become so petty and they waste so much time policing this stuff. Let's throw it all out. Let's be like France or Italy or America. Kids can be themselves.
Do you want to know what I thought was easy, though, Jake? When getting ready for school, and maybe parents thought this as well, there was none of that, oh, what should I be wearing and what's going to be matching whatever. There was no distraction you got into. You're calling it a sort of a shabby uniform, but actually it was to be like all your friends, as Philip said, but none of those distractions yourself first thing in the morning.
Well, it's shabby and it's cheap and it's bad quality, and the kids don't respect it. They slash it and cover it in pen.
Oh,
but listen, in the week,
Christine, you come in. You come in, Christine.
Because there's a lot of shabby nylon that is also bad for the planet that's being used for social wear. And that's for wasting time. Parents wasting far more time in the morning trying to find out what their children are going to wear, make sure they're presentable, rather than the small amount of time in good schools where policies are good so the children can crack on and get on with their education. That's what they're there for, not a fashion show.
Jake, can you satisfy my curiosity? Are you arguing for a complete free-for-all, that literally kids can turn up to school in anything at all that they like? You know, they could go in their, beach wear, towel, bikini, or what? I mean, would you literally have a complete free-for-all, or would you have any rules at all?
I think there would need to be some kind of guidance, as they would have in France, across Europe, in the States. I mean, obviously, you don't want a kid turning up in a bikini, or a boy in a swimsuit or whatever. But I would remind you about the scenes in school uniform shops in the days preceding the beginning of term. It's like a middle-aged bun fight. It's so stressful, with parents, going crazy trying to get the right stuff, the right.
Jake,
house,
I'm gonna stop you just there, because we did actually do a poll online, didn't we, about as kids go back to school, should they have a strict uniform policy? I have to say 65% on the Twitter poll said that. Should it be a relaxed policy to save some money? We thought about that, 27%. But should school uniforms be abolished? Only 8% said that. You're in the minority, Jake, so how are you going to win your case? Christine is winning.
Well, just because I'm in the minority doesn't mean that I'm wrong. I'm afraid that's the way of the world. Common sense is to a limited few.
Christine, I mean, is there an argument that schools, that Jake said, that they are being a bit too pettifogging here, and they are insisting on too much strict, there's got to be a particular blazer, a particular type of jumper or whatever, that kids could be smart, but it doesn't have to be quite so prescriptive. Is there an argument for actually reducing the prescriptive nature of the uniform?
Did you vote for the relaxed one?
I didn't vote at all.
A relaxed one for the cheaper cost, Christine?
OK, I'm going to put my very sensible hat on now, Jake. OK, so I do believe, it depends on where the school is and what the needs of that school. So, for example, we're an independent school, so we do have very strict prescriptive uniform. But as I say, take your ties off this week and bin the blazer. But we do have 2 other schools for children with special needs, and they wear very sensible trousers and polo shirts, so we adapt and change to where the school is. So, and Jake, I do believe, yes, all children, we just got to get on and get educated, and it didn't do you any harm. But unfortunately, for some, it does. So
do you want to know one thing I always wanted to wear, and I'm just wondering where Christine is on this? I would have sooner have worn trousers. I actually wear a lot of trouser suits. Are you happy? Would you relax it that way? Can girls wear trousers rather than the skirt that we've always traditionally had?
We don't have to relax it, because we've got tartan kilts, we've got tartan trousers, and the girls are very welcome to wear those, as are the boys. So, come and have a look at what we do.
Jake, I was just sort of interested that, you said that there couldn't be a proper free-for-all, whatever, and you also then criticised teachers for spending too much time policing it. It strikes me, if you're not arguing for a total free-for-all, that there has to be some rules, you're still going to end up with teachers having to police it, as kids are always going to push the boundaries further and further and further anyway, aren't they? So you're not actually going to achieve what you want, are you? Because if you have any rules at all, it's still going to have to be policed.
No, I think I will achieve what I want. I mean, I'm not that I'm launching a campaign for this, but in my utopian world, there'd be a mutual respect between teachers and pupils in a way that there doesn't exist at the moment, because teachers are policing things like the length of skirt and the roll of the skirt and whether the shirt's untucked. My son got a detention for having an untucked shirt outside of school the other week. You know, and I think that if you have some general guidelines that reasonable clothes, that we've heard the word sensible quite a lot in this discussion, let's bring it back here, sensible, within sensible boundaries, then kids can be respected and trusted to wear something that's reasonable, as happens all over the world.
Jake, Christine, thank you very much indeed for joining us. A great debate there. Are you for strict? I'm for strict, actually.
I'm for absolutely a uniform for the reasons I said, whether it was because that sort of equalisation in school so that every kid looked the same. They weren't trying to compete with each other fashionable clothes. I do like the fact that you could get cheaper clothes if possible. We used to have a thrift shop and we could all buy second-hand blazers and get them sort of cheaper. And the other thing, the only thing I did hate about the school uniform, and I'm going to put this out there, and with this I'm with Jake, my mum got me a skirt when I started school that pretty much went to the floor, which I had to roll up, and I wore it for years. I hated that long skirt that I wore forever. She said I'd grow into it. I never grew very much. I just had a big outfit for most of my school life.
You see, I'm for strict. I think it's good for discipline. I think it's good for the school, image of the school. If the kids go out into the community and they're very smart and people look at it, and I think, you know, the stricter the better.
I had a little boater hat as well in junior school, a little boater hat. But I tell you one thing that was more important than the uniforms, don't know what you two both think here, we weren't allowed to eat in public walking down the road. So talking about being strict because it didn't look right, we weren't allowed to walk down the road eating or drinking. Is that why you're so slim and I'm so fat? Because we didn't have the same rule in our school. Is that basically the situation? It totally was. Now, we believe that we're going to hand over to Tamsin, who has got some news for us. Tamsin, over to you. You've got some news.
Esther, yes, thank you very much. Got some breaking news here for you on GB News. That terror suspect Daniel Khalif has been arrested in Chiswick in West London and is now in police custody. That from the Metropolitan Police. Of course, we've been reporting this morning Daniel Khalif had been searched by police since Wednesday after escaping from Wandsworth Prison. Police have been searching the Chiswick area overnight, focusing on the district after intelligence-led activity and confirmed sighting. So we can bring you that news now, that terror suspect Daniel Khalif has been arrested in Chiswick in West London after a hunt since Wednesday by the Metropolitan Police. That news just in by the Met Police themselves, and he now is in police custody. Back to you now, Esther.
Tamsin, thank you very much indeed. People said, we've been saying this morning, and we had Beverly
we
had
Bev Turner on. She was there at the scene,
yeah,
wasn't
our
she?
very own Bev Turner from GB News, who was there telling us all of that. Thank you, Tamsin. So up next, it's our regular sports and showbiz updates with Hayley Palmer and Aidan McGee. We'll be back with you in just a moment.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, GBNews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to GBNews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, welcome back to Saturday Morning Live with Esther and Phil. The time now is 11:49.
And with the news that we've just heard from Tamsin, if you are eagle-eyed, you'll be able to see in the background the marvellous Martin Daubney. There he is, giving us a big thumbs up.
Who's just come into the studio slightly earlier than his regular show, which has started in 10 minutes' time, because we're going to be bringing you right now all the latest on what's been happening with Daniel Khalif, that he's been found in Chiswick. Martin, over to you.
Thank you very much. Hello, welcome to GB News Saturday with me, Martin Daubney. Over the next 3 hours, we'll keep you company on your TV, online and on your digital radio. All the big stories that matter to you. Coming up in this next hour, the manhunt for escaped prisoner Daniel Khalif is over. They've just arrested him in West London after confirmed sightings overnight. A big police dragnet involved with helicopters, search boats on the River Thames, terror units in vans, eyewitnesses locally. He has been apprehended and caught. A big breaking news story for you. Also in the show, the Prime Minister insists he's fired up and entirely confident the Tories can win the next general election. But with schools crumbling, rising living costs, the small boats crisis, the list goes on. Can the Tories win, or are they toast? And finally, heads of government are coming together in India for the G20 summit, with Rishi Sunak to hold talks with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi today. We'll go live to Delhi with Chopper for the latest with our political editor. Please do get in touch. Send me your thoughts on GB Views at gbnews.com, or of course on socials. But first, it's the news headlines. No, it's not. We're going straight to me. This is breaking news. It's fast happening. Because as we just said, with the terror man... it's all gone wrong. It's here. Chip Chapman, we have him coming up soon on the arrest of the terror suspect. He escaped from Wandsworth Prison and he's been apprehended. It's all coming up in GB News. We've got our first guest. Here it is. Police have arrested prisoner Daniel Khalif. Beg your pardon, we're getting the audio in the right place. This story is just happening. Joining me now for the latest is GB News Home Security editor Mark White. Are you there, Mark? It's Chip Chapman. We have Chip Chapman, Army for the Army angle, former head of counter-terrorism, Major General Chip Chapman. Chip, dramatic breaking news. He was apprehended, Daniel Khalif, in West London, just arrested by police, very much now fitting the pattern that he has been in the local area since his breakout from Wandsworth. First of all, how happy are you that he has been finally apprehended?
Well, I'm extremely happy. I think what it can tell you as well is that there was really no external link in terms of him probably getting away. If he'd have been sort of sponsored by the Iranians, and that's one of the main charges under the Official Secrets Act, you'd have expected him to be in a safe house and probably whisked away across the channel. The fact that he was still local probably shows you that that's not the case. So that leaves the possibility, two possibilities really, of how he escaped. The first one is he may have, because he's a Royal Signaller, he may have been neurodiverse problem solver. He might have been one of those people who looked at the sort of safety systems and over a number of months decided he could get out. Or there could have been some internal aid in the same way that there was for George Blake. But the difference in the George Blake one, there was a safe house. There were people who were getting him out. And the problem with this guy is, of course, that there was a plan to escape, but not much beyond that. So he'll be famous for that. But, you know, it's the bookend of an operation, getting away and getting away cleanly forevermore, not just getting out of the prison.
And Chip, there's a lot of speculation about Daniel Khalif's training in recent days. It seems he's not quite the survival expert a lot of people had him painted out as. They sort of made out some sort of John Rambo. But as a member of the Royal Signals, he's more an IT guy, right? So this guy wouldn't have been trained in survival or evasion skills, and it seems that may have been leading to his downfall.
Yeah, I think he's a computer network engineer. So the danger in the Official Secrets Act term is that he may have exfiltrated a lot of data, or if he were working for the Iranians, he may have put viruses or things like that in the system. Now, in terms of his background training, there is a thing called SEER training in the armed forces, that's survival, evasion, resistance and escape training. And generally, there's only those who are at the sort of tip of the sphere, either sort of special forces or those prone to capture, as we saw, for example, in the first Gulf War with John Nichol, John Peters, the Tornado crew that was shot down, or the very famous Bravo 20 patrol from the SAS. Now, what was in his favour for the length of time he's been out is that to survive, you really need three things. You need food, water and shelter. And, of course, the weather's been very good, so he's not going to freeze his little bits off, and it's pretty easy to scavenge for food from dustbins if you need to, if you haven't really got a plan beyond escaping, and you can always get water. Those things were in his favour. If this had been winter, he'd have probably been captured even quicker. So I wouldn't say he's a survival expert. He's probably not done the course. The limit of what he's done may have been skinning a rabbit or skinning a chicken and cooking it as an introduction to that sort of stuff, but there's no way he's a survival expert.
Assuming that with his regiment and with his IT background, the extent of his survival training may have just been watching a video sort of once a year in his basic refresher training. This guy would not be trained in outdoor survival at all.
That's right. One of the military annual training tests is to do with this survival sort of stuff. But unless you're going on one of the formalised courses, which are held at RAF St Morgan, they watch a 1 hour video. So that is just to introduce them to the subject, in the sense that the key thing for most people who are not likely to be captured in any warfare situation is to retain their honour. That is, try and escape as soon as you can if you are captured, and that you don't give information away to the enemy. And again, that is one of those things that happened to George Blake, who did serve in the Korean War.
And Chip, one of the theories, of course, that with his insight into intel, secrets for UK eyes only, access to sensitive information about British intelligence and movements, cryptographic methods and our communications, he was considered something of a prize asset to the Iranians. That doesn't seem to have materialised so far. A lot of people speculating he may have been trying to jump the country quite quickly. It seems like a low-level bungled escape that's gone wrong, and he simply ran out of room.
Yeah, I think so. And one of the anomalies on this, of course, is that the rather bizarre bomb attempt, the bomb hoax, which then led to him going absent without leave from the army in early January for 24 days. If he was a prized asset of the Iranians, you'd have expected him to say, look, boys, I've been compromised, you need to get me out. The fact that that didn't happen, and that he had such a ridiculous operation in this sort of bomb, leaving 3 canisters with wires on a desk in his accommodation would show that this guy is not trained in any tradecraft and wouldn't be a prized asset in that sense. But then you have to go back, I think, and look at his motivation. What motivated him to try and do this sort of stuff? And there's really only four things that you look at there: either revenge, ideology, money, or ego.
And in terms of his, the information he may have got his hands on or his eyes on and could have passed on, is there a residual threat, do you believe, to the British forces, to British security as a result of that? Or do you think that could be, that those loopholes could be closed by British intelligence services?
Well, to me, that's the main question. So the official secrets charge that he's got is that he was gathering information that could be useful to an enemy between the 1st of May 2019 and the 6th of January 2022. Now, the other charge, the terrorism charge about the sort of bomb, hoax bomb on the desk, looks slightly anomalous. Now, if you add these two up, the thing which is interesting from someone like me who knows some of the background of this is often you have proxy charges. That is, that you charge someone with a particular offence, but that might not be the totality of what went on, because there are sensitivities that you don't want to be disclosed, and that could be one of the methods here. That if he's really done some damage, so we don't really know. But that's a long time to either exfiltrate information and data from the system, or to put things in the system. And if it was put in the system, and here I'm talking about malware or spyware or viruses and things like that, to not to have found that would be highly unusual. So more likely to be exfiltrating data than infiltrating viruses. But we'll see in the round. But there are some curious anomalies in the charges.
Chip Chapman, thank you very much for that insight on this dramatic breaking news. Daniel Khalif arrested in West London, apprehended after a short escape from Wandsworth. Thank you for joining us now. We're joined by former Detective Chief Inspector Perry Benton. Good morning to you. Good afternoon indeed, Perry. So dramatic developments cut short by the police. In terms of the nature of the police pursuit and capture, how happy are you? I mean, we saw dramatic scenes overnight. Police helicopters around the Grove Park, Chiswick Bridge area. There were